Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the new Cheltenham Town podcast, We Can't Read. I'm Richard Joyce, and this week we're back again with another podcast bringing you some exclusive insights into life at Cheltenham Town during the coronavirus pandemic shutdown. The Robins' very own Luke Saunders joins me again, and on the podcast we've got interviews with manager Michael Duff and captain Ben Tozer to look forward to as well. Luke, another week with no football during the lockdown, but nevertheless at Cheltenham Town there really has been plenty going on off the pitch, hasn't there?
Yeah, of course. There's plenty going on in all departments around the club at the moment, and things have been quite busy without the football, which is surprising. But there is plenty going on. But I'm pretty sure Matt Uttridge is still tending to the pitch most days to keep it free from weeds, ready for when it all comes back and returns. And it's also great to see Luke Varney's been continuing to call around to check up on our supporters, which is good. And now we can we have the players shaving their heads to raise money for our wonderful NHS, which is great. Yeah,
that's right. You know, that's been a real big success. We'll be hearing a lot more about that on the podcast throughout this entire podcast. And, like you just mentioned it there, Ben Tozer kick-started the idea, and it's fantastic that in what is such a tricky time right now for so many people that the players and the club have been so charitable in that way.
Absolutely. It's a great initiative that Ben has led and is trying to pull members of the squad into. So obviously you've got him, the captain, Sean Long, George Lloyd and Alex Adai have braved the shave so far. It looks like Bookie, Steve Book, the goalkeeping coach, is next if we reach £2,500. So let's get there and keep this going throughout the team and the staff, and hopefully more will join in over time. It's really great how many people have got on board with this and are donating towards a great cause. The NHS and its staff are working tirelessly with limited resources to fight this outbreak, and it's really great to see that the club and its fans are coming together to raise funds for the local battle against COVID-19 and for Gloucestershire Hospitals Foundations Trust.
Yeah, definitely. Now we've got the first of two quite lengthy interviews on our podcast coming up shortly. Michael Duff's going to be the first one, but Luke, we wanted to set a teaser for the fans this week, didn't we, to have a little think about during the podcast, and we'll be giving the answer later on towards the end. You've got the teaser. Let's see what you've got.
Okay, so the ever-reliable Connor Thomas has scored 4 penalties this season, which is the joint highest in the division. Can you think of at least 2 of the other 5 players who have also scored that many from the spot?
Brilliant. So 2 of the other 5 players who've also scored 4 penalties in League 2 this season. Have a think, and we'll reveal the answer at the end of the podcast coming up shortly. But firstly, we've got our first interview, and that is with Michael Duff. I was speaking to him yesterday about the latest with the team, moving the club forward. I also spoke to him about the Russian and Diamonds playoff game back in the early 2000s, which of course he was involved in, and some of the other big game experiences and how influential that Russian game was in influencing his career. There's a certain amount of updates coming through from the EFL and from the football club. What sort of communication right now are you having with people like Paul Godfrey and others at the club to sort of almost keep in tabs of what's going on right now?
Well, we have a weekly staff meeting, which has now been moved to twice a week via Zoom. Just trying to everyone keep up to date with. Obviously, you've got the physios and the sports scientists keeping up with the players. Paul Godfrey and Mickey is pretty much daily. We've started setting homework for the players now, so we're having weekly meetings with the players in their units, defenders, midfielders and forwards, just to watch that we're sending them games to watch of us and other teams that play in the same formation as us, just trying to learn, just to stimulate them mentally as much as anything. So there's still quite a lot of communication. As regards to do we know where we are at the minute? No. I think there's a meeting as we speak now that's going on between the LMA, the PFA, the Football League and the Premier League to decide how they're going to try and come to some sort of conclusion based on games and people's wages and things like that as well. So it's very much up in the air.
And obviously it goes without saying there's still a huge amount of uncertainty, like you say, but given the position we're in, the fantastic season we've had, we're very keen for it to continue.
Yeah, well, I think everybody, I think the one common denominator is that if possible, not just because we're doing well, but for me personally, I'm not quite sure how you can prioritise a season that's never existed to a season that's already 75% done. But how we get about that, I don't know. Because no matter what happens, there's going to be somebody that's not happy with it. But I think it is important that we do try and finish this season to some sort of conclusion, and then move forward from there.
Obviously, last week you spent a bit of time ringing around some of our supporters. How did you find doing that?
Yeah, it was good. I think it was a bit of a surprise for them, and it's nothing that, it's just a phone call on our behalf. But hopefully, it lifts their spirits and just lets them know that they're not on their own, even though some people are literally stuck on their own. There's always the end of a telephone that this Zoom app must be going mad because we seem to be on it every night, speaking to family and friends, and I think the supporters just appreciate just a thank you, because that's we do appreciate particularly the more vulnerable people at these times, and they're generally the ones that have supported the club for the longest. So it's just nice to give a little bit back.
And the players themselves have, over the last 24 hours, been doing a head shave to raise money for...
I just said about that,
yeah. They've raised a really good sum of money so far in a very short amount of time. What are your thoughts on your players going the extra mile and doing that?
I think it's fantastic. I think this hair grows back, but the money that's raised to support the front line, the workers in the NHS, I think it's anything that anybody can do at the minute. The amount of hours that they're putting in, and obviously I know people who are involved, and the shift they're having to put in, and the pressure they're under, and the risk that they're at as well. So to anybody that can give anything or any little bit to help, I think it's great. And the players they've obviously been bored sitting around. There's only so much running you can do while watching football, so they've obviously thought, well, sit around and try and make use of their time to a better purpose, and it sounds like a good idea.
Last Saturday, we did a full match replay of the playoff final win against Rushden and Diamonds in Cardiff. Of course, that was one of the early big games you played in your career. How helpful was playing in the big games like that, and of course at Wembley in the trophy final, in terms of how it helped you moving forward, and obviously playing a lot bigger games in the Premier League?
I don't know, to be honest. I think one thing I do know is that I've played in 3 big finals, as in the Trophy final, a Championship playoff final at Wembley, and the playoff final in the Millennium. And luckily, I won all of them. But I don't remember a lot about the games. I remember the nights out afterwards, but I don't remember much about the games. I think it does just sort of pass you by. You just get caught up in the emotion. But I was lucky that I managed to play in such big games at such an early stage in my career. So did it help me? Probably, without knowing. So I don't know whether it actually helped me prepare for the bigger games later in my career, because obviously when I did get to the Premier League, I was 30, 31, so I'd had a little football under my belt anyway. But they're all fantastic occasions, and it's hard to specify. People always assume that the Championship one, because it was 90,000 people and it was to get into the Premier League. Everyone assumed that was the biggest game, but the first one at Wembley, to play at the old Wembley at 19, I think I was an unbelievable experience, and then obviously the promotion with the Rushden game, that was the next level. So it just sort of like got bigger and bigger and bigger. But from a personal point of view, each one had their own value at the same level.
Rushden had Amani Powell playing up front for them in that final. He'd come into their team, he'd scored a lot of goals, he had an impact, particularly in the first half of that final. Obviously, you've played against some big strikers since then, but when you were going into that game, knowing how much of an influence he'd had on their teams in recent weeks, is that something that, as a defender particularly, you have in the back of your mind?
Was it Powell or was it Lowe?
Oh yeah, Lowe, yes, you're right, Amani Lowe.
See, my memory's better than yours. I just remember him. I know the game went out. I've not watched the game back. It's not, like I said, that's not really my thing. I just remember him. He was big, he was strong, he was left-footed. He was much stronger than I was, so obviously I was still quite slight at the time. So things like that probably did help me earlier in my career, because I had to find a way. I couldn't out-muscle him. I couldn't use my brute strength, so I had to try and be cuter. And he was a real powerhouse. Coming up against him earlier on, and then obviously later on in your career, you're coming up across people who are similar sort of ilk of people like Didier Drogba, and I can't remember his name now, who went from Swansea to Man City, Ivory Coast. What was his name?
Bonnie?
Yeah, Wilfred Boney. They were the two strongest players I played against ever. They were unbelievably strong. They could wind you in the air. They could pin you in the air. So that's. But and he was a similar sort of type, just a lower level. But he sort of came in and done really well, and then disappeared again. I'm not quite sure where he went to, but he was a good player. I know that.
Yeah, and obviously there was a rivalry already existing with Rushden from the conference days. Was that something that had a little sort of extra edge to that final in Cardiff?
Yeah, I think so. They almost became our rivals for 4 or 5 years with the 2 years in the conference that we had with them, and obviously the Rushden game when we beat them at their place when we scored 2 in the last minute was still to this day one of the best games I've ever played in. So then to go and meet them again. I think we got promoted in '99. They got promoted, I think it was the year after, and then to meet them again to get into the next league 2 years later again was it's sort of the sign of the progress that the two clubs have made. But obviously theirs was based on money. I think Mouse Griggs pumped a lot of money into them, had a fantastic stadium. Ours was built on a more spirit. So it was definitely a clash of cultures, but it was a good little rivalry for us. It wasn't particularly long, 5 or 6 years, but it was they were definitely our rivals at the time.
And thinking back to the Wembley final in the FA Trophy, did that experience help yourself, the team of players you were in, and also perhaps Steve Cottrell in terms of that big match experience as well, moving forward when all the success you had?
I think that the trophy final was almost a signal of intent of, well, we're not bad. I think we finished second in the league the year we won the year we won the trophy. And then that sort of like almost like we need to go one better now. So I think the next year we won the league. I think we got to the semi-finals in the trophy. So the 2 years that we did have in that league were unbelievable. To come first and second and have a semi-final and a final is, but it just sort of showed the momentum that the club had started to create, and we managed as players, and obviously all under Steve. He takes all the credit for everything because he brought pretty much every player in, all the players that were already existing. He dragged them from the Southern League into League One.
That was Michael Duff then, and Luke, you've been a Cheltenham Town follower and of course an employee for a number of years now. What are some of the big games that you can recall from your time following the club that stick out in your mind?
I mean, there's so many to choose from, aren't there? So many great moments. But I'm going to keep consistent here, and I'm going to go for 3-2-1 away victories. And there's something about winning on the road that makes it feel that little bit more special. The first was a freezing cold December night in 2012. Over 1,000 Cheltenham fans made the trip to Hereford, who we had traditionally struggled against at the time. And in an FA Cup replay, and the glory of hosting Everton was the prize for the winner. So it was such a big game at the time after drawing the first game at Wadham Road. Probably the coldest I've ever been at a football match, which obviously makes it stick in the memory. You could barely see the pitch because of the fog, but you could just about see Kaid Mohammed leap and score that header in extra time to send the away end wild. It was a great couple of years at the club with the playoffs too, and a great time to be following Cheltenham. And of course the Dover game in the National League title winning season. I actually missed this one, but having gone out of the room at 1-0 to come back and see it was 2-1 was like nothing I've ever seen before on BT Sport. And of course, it was a memorable season as well with the title and that brilliant commentary line. That is the character of potential champions. So that was wonderful to see. And I think the one I would pick from since I've sort of started working at the club would be this season. I mentioned Bradford last week and how big that game was this season, but Walsall away was particularly memorable for the scenes when Varney scored that winner in front of the 700 odd away fans. It was great to get that on camera as well. It was amazing. The atmosphere was great, and it was the third away win in a row, which at the time hadn't been achieved for a few years. So certainly three there that stick in my mind.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like winning away, is there? And the sort of feeling afterwards when you make that journey home, it certainly makes the journey a lot shorter. You mentioned the Walsall game there, Luke. What would you consider to be some of the other big games where Cheltenham have come out on top on in the current season?
I think many will agree. Again, I mentioned Bradford. That game on a Tuesday night, sort of towards the start of the season, had everything. Considering it was goalless at half time, its second half just exploded into life. Really good atmosphere that night as well. I'd say doing a job on Plymouth away from home early on in the season was huge. Despite losing that reverse fixture on Boxing Day, that was a really big away win, considering we've been under pressure for a long period in that game. Northampton, like Bradford, took 4 points off them, and the 2-1 victory at home a few weeks ago was another cracker under the lights. But two really good away performances as well that stick out with Colchester very recently. To go there and win, a really talented squad there, and they were excellent that day, Cheltenham. And Mansfield away, there was a lot of injuries in the squad at the time, and to go there and win 3-0, I know they haven't been doing too well this season, Mansfield, but that was a really strong performance from Cheltenham that day.
And here we are with 10 games left to go of the League Two season, if it gets back underway, as we all hope, of course, it does. Do you think other teams, even now, are still looking at Cheltenham and thinking, yeah, they're a real threat? Or do you think at some point there's still some teams thinking, look, if we look at the playoff picture, Cheltenham is one of those teams we think that could drop out of it maybe?
I think if and hopefully when the season resumes, there's only 10 games or so to go. And I think it would be a shock to see Cheltenham drop off now, given the consistency of the team all season long. That being said, that the unexpected break could affect a lot of teams. So let's hope that we're not one of those. But as you've said before, we've been absolutely unbelievable this season and kind of written off a lot of times, I think. So coming so close to the end now, I think I can't see Cheltenham dropping out of it. And certainly not the playoff picture. Top 3 is another story. That's going to be so tight between 4 or 5 teams. But I think sort of top 7, surely we're close to securing that now.
Yeah, 100%. Doing it quietly, just as we should be doing. And one man who's been crucial in all of that, of course, is Ben Tozer. There's been a lot in the on the website and so on this week about the fantastic fundraiser he's led with regards to raising money for the NHS. And we can hear a bit more about that fundraiser and also what Ben has made of being part of this Cheltenham Town team right now.
Having these team meetings now in different departments in the team with the management over video conference. So what's that been like?
Well, that was our first one today. It was pretty constructive. It was good. It's good to just see each other and talk to each other, on a footballing level rather than just banter in the group kind of thing. It was good. It was good. Just trying to learn new things, really.
Certainly, and obviously it's now been a few weeks, without football. Has it been tricky trying not to switch off from that sort of intensity that you're so used to during the season?
The thing is, you can get so into a relaxed mood pretty quick, can't you? Really, it is easy to kind of to switch off from it. It's probably harder to when you switch off from it to get back into it. So I guess this is good to keep us ticking over.
The big thing in the last couple of days, of course, has been non-football related, and that's the fundraiser which you've been doing to try and raise money for the NHS. Can you tell me a bit about how it all came about?
Yeah, I mean, watching the news and everything that's going on, it's pretty obvious what's going on, but it's just such a sad situation, and I know there's so many amazing workers out there, people that you don't even think about, just the bin men and stuff like that. Putting their bodies on the line for it, really. But yeah, the NHS is obviously they're literally putting their lives on the line, saving other people, and risking catching the virus themselves. And I just thought if there's anything I can do to kind of help, and I just saw other people doing things, like your mate doing that marathon in the garden, and I thought, what can I do to help? And I haven't got the time to be doing a 4-hour marathon or however long it takes, but I just thought I could do something simple like shave my hair off. People think footballers are pretty vain people in general, so it's nice to kind of see what other people think about it in the terms of they think, will more people do it? Will they do it? Will they not? So yeah.
And you've raised nearly £2,500 so far with the gift aid as well. That takes that over that. You must be pretty pleased with how much has been raised and still wanting more people to if they can, to dip their hands into in their digital pockets.
Definitely, it's amazing. It's unbelievable, really. I couldn't. I think we set a first goal of £500, which seemed a million miles away, and then now we're looking at £2,500, which is amazing, just for a hair shave. And but it's obviously not. It's not about myself or the lads doing it. That's just the challenge, really, to see if people will sponsor the Grey NHS for people shaving their hair is pretty amazing.
And, Matt, he's donated some old classic shirts that are going to go into an auction as well to add to the total, which will boost the number even more.
Incredible. I mean, I've been messaging him personally, and what a great guy for doing that. It's a pretty big thing to give up, old shirts that you've probably loved and cherished for years, and probably took a while to get hold of himself. I don't know, but his mum and sister both work in the NHS. They both say how thankful they are for what I'm doing. And I've just reminded them, look, you shouldn't be thanking me, it's me thanking you. So, and us, everyone donating, thanking you. So that's the main thing. Back
to the football then. In terms of your career so far, Ben, you've obviously played for a lot of clubs because you started very early at 17 at Swindon. Where does this season rank in terms of the overall quality, would you say, in terms of all the teams you've been a part of?
I think it's definitely up there. The organisation of everything the Gaffer's implemented, even like this meetings and stuff, and learning an individual role. It sounds ridiculous, but there's, out of my 13 years of playing and whatever, there's, when I was at Swindon, I got taught quite a bit of work in the defence. Defensively, I got taught quite a lot of work, which was amazing, and obviously that helped me get my big move. But from then on, sadly, there's never really been much individual or even unit coaching. A lot of football is generally off the cuff. You learn your patterns as an 11, but you don't generally go off in units and have such what's the word? You don't have such detail in your work, and obviously the Gaffer, being a centre half himself, and having a very good career himself, has got that across to us, really.
The players often say, we all know our jobs, which as a statement almost sounds ridiculous, but it is true, isn't it? It must be some of the clearest ways to play you've ever had in your career.
Definitely. It's literally, the Gaffer goes on about framework and freedom. We've got the framework, we work from that, and then it gives us the freedom to do what our ability does. Whereas, a lot of clubs that I've been at, you kind of just get the freedom. The freedom to express yourself as a player, and you need that, but you also need the framework. You look at teams like Sheffield United who've come up and done unbelievable. You see they have a structure, they have a way of playing. It's pretty obvious. Whereas, also teams like Wolves, superb. They don't ever really look like getting beat by more than one goal if they ever do. So but then there'll be teams that are kind of playing off the cuff, and it's probably not so in the Premier League, but definitely in our league, there'll be teams that are kind of playing off the cuff and just allowed the freedom to do what they want.
There's obviously still a huge amount of uncertainty, but I'd imagine, understandably, you're massively determined for this season to come to a conclusion in terms of us playing all the games.
Rightly so. I think it's easy to say when you're doing well, but it is the right thing to do, in my opinion, because I don't understand why they would ever prioritise next season over this season, a season that's got so much riding on it and so much at stake. Not just ours, every league, even the ones that have been completely binned off. I think it's a bit out of order, really. I understand the financial implications of it all, but money's not everything, is it? It's at the moment, it's people's lives at stake, and there are people will probably be mentally affected by it, by the lack of football. Is their life, is their structure, is it's just going to watch a game. It's routine, isn't it? Everyone's routine has just been completely thrown out.
That's Ben Tozer then. And Luke, do you think Tozer is perhaps arguably one of the most important players in the Cheltenham squad, given the role that he has in the middle of the back three of the team?
Absolutely. I think he's perhaps gone under the radar at times. He's only missed one, maybe 2 games all season. I had to double check that, but he's been vital in that central role. His 1v1 defending is excellent. There's been many a time when the opposition have broke away, and he's dealt with that threat really, really well. He's got a bit of pace about him as well. Certainly, if one of those quick strikers gets in, he does very well to keep up with them. It's a difficult position. to play, really. And his range of passing, such as switching the play, is very accomplished. Sometimes it's easy to lose the ball when you're often the main defender bringing it out, but his leadership and experience has been vital this season. I can see a few fans voting for him as Player of the Year at the end of the season, that's for sure. And that's not an easy choice given how well the team has performed this season.
When you think about his first few weeks at the club, of course, he came in initially on a 2-year deal, and his first few weeks and his first few months, it's amazing how much it's changed, isn't it? Because he really looked like perhaps he was almost going to be a bit of a goner, but now you can't imagine a Cheltenham Town starting 11 without him.
That's absolutely correct. When he first came in under Gary Johnson, he was in the midfield in a 4-4-2 and kind of quickly dropped out of the team then until sort of Michael Duff came in. And I think the switch in system to 3-5-2 came around September 2018, and he wasn't featuring, and then bang, I think it was that game against Arsenal in the Checkatrade Trophy at the time, and ever since then he kind of took that role in the middle of the back five just like a duck to water, really. He is probably one of the top 3 most important players in this team, and as you've said before, arguably perhaps even the most important player in the team.
So, Luke, now it's time, as we get towards the end of the podcast, to reveal some of the answers. Of course, we asked earlier a teaser question. If you could just remind us what that question is and reveal some of the answers, and hopefully some of our listeners have potentially got a few of their guesses in whilst they've been listening to the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, again, the ever reliable Connor Thomas has scored 4 penalties this season, which is the joint highest in League Two. Can you name at least 2 of the other 5 who have scored that many from the spot? And the answers were Joe Ironside of Macclesfield Town, a player with his roots in non-league. Anthony Sarcevic at Plymouth Argyle, been really good this season in midfield for them. James Vaughan, who's now at Tranmere, but started the season at Bradford City. He also had 4. And Danny Rose at Mansfield was the other one, who's been a scorer in this division for quite a few years.
Connor Thomas, Mr. Reliable from the penalty spot, as always. Luke, thank you very much. Fantastic to speak to you again on episode 2 here of the We Can't Read podcast. Thanks very much for your time. Make sure you stay safe. And Robins fans, make sure you keep an eye out. Hopefully soon, if it hasn't been launched already, we'll have the auction going for these fantastic shirts that have been donated for some classic Cheltenham Town players from the past. And also, please keep giving your donations if you can towards the NHS fundraiser as well. And we'll have 1 or 2 more things coming out in the next few days on the Cheltenham Town website for you to keep an eye on as well. Luke, thank you very much. Take care of yourself, and thank you very much for listening here to the We Can't Read episode 2 podcast.
This is a vital update about coronavirus.
To help save lives, stay at home. Anyone can spread coronavirus. You should now only go out when absolutely necessary for food, medicine, work, or exercise. Always try to stay 2 meters apart. Do not meet others outside your household, even friends and family.
Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.